video, we are going to discuss various aspects of the velocity time graph. The velocity time graph represents a graph between velocity of an object and the time interval. The time is taken along x-axis and the velocity is taken along the y direction. Say the origin in this graph is at O. So along OY, the velocity of the object is represented, and along OX, the time is plotted. Any arbitrary velocity time graph can be given by like this. In this graph, as the time increases, the velocity of the object is also increasing. Next is the slope of the velocity time graph. So what is the slope of a graph? First of all, we need to know that. Again, taking velocity and time, taking the same graph. So let us assume any 2 points. Let us take any 2 points A and B on the velocity time graph. Origin O, X and Y. Now on this graph, we draw a horizontal line from the velocity axis at point A, another horizontal line at point B from the velocity axis, and also drop these vertical lines. So this portion along y-axis gives us a change in velocity. Say we represent it by dv. A corresponding change in time can be given by the time interval between these 2 points. Say that time interval we represent by dt. So this is equivalent to the change in parameter along y-axis to a corresponding divided by a corresponding change in the parameter along x-axis, say dx. So this by definition dy by dx is the slope of the graph. So in this graph, the velocity and time graph, this slope is basically the ratio between change in velocity of the object in a given time interval. And by definition, this ratio is acceleration of that object. As velocity is a vector quantity and time is a scalar quantity, so the acceleration is also a vector quantity. So in other words, we can say that the slope of the velocity time graph represents acceleration of the object. So the slope is equivalent to acceleration. Next is now, what about the positive acceleration or the positive slope? What is the meaning of this point? Again, taking the graph. This graph is having positive slope. That means with increase in time, the values of the velocity of the object are also increasing. That means dv as well as dt both are positive, and hence the acceleration is also positive. So we can say that a positive slope of the velocity time graph gives us a positive value of acceleration. Now what is the meaning of positive value of acceleration? It means with the increase in time, the velocity of the object is also increasing. Velocity of the object is also increasing, and that's why it is called the positive acceleration. Just like this, the graph can have negative slope also. That means with increase in time, as we move along the time axis, if the graph is somewhat like this, this represents a graph having negative slope. But what is the meaning of this negative slope? That means as we move along the time axis, the velocity of the object was initially at some higher value, and as time increases, the velocity drops to some lower value, further drops to some lower value, and so on. That means dv is a negative quantity now, but dt is a positive quantity. So when we take the ratio of these two parameters, dv by dt, the ratio comes out to be negative. That means the acceleration of the object is negative, which is a vector quantity again. And so a negative slope indicates negative acceleration of the object. Negative slope represents negative slope of the object. And there is another option if the slope is 0. What is the meaning of that? A zero slope on the velocity time graph means it is a straight line. So this line has 0 slope. What does it indicate? Let us take any 2 points on the graph. It is the only horizontal line along the velocity axis, corresponding vertical lines. So corresponding to these points A and B, change in velocity is 0 because they both correspond to the same velocity. So the change in velocity is 0, but there is some non-zero value of the time entropy. It is not equal to 0. That means the slope dv by dt is 0. And what does it represent on the velocity time graph? It represents that the object has, and it also represents acceleration to be 0. Acceleration 0 means there is no change in the velocity of the object with time, and it has, in other words, the velocity of the object is a constant quantity. Velocity of the object is a constant quantity. So this is one of the aspects of the velocity time graph.